Hello, welcome back, and as always, I hope you're doing well. Right guys, this is not the video I intended to do this week. I was actually working on doing a review for Game of Death 2. I know it's more a Bruceploitation than a Bruce Lee movie, but it is in all the box sets, and I always get asked to do it. But while I was browsing the internet this week, just looking up Bruce Lee articles and stuff, I came across an article on the website City on Fire, and the article was called Enter the Dragon, the most overrated kung fu movie ever, with a question mark. It was from 2018 and it was written by Paul Bramhill. Right, now before I read out the article and break down what I think of it, it is a very well written piece, I'll give you that. But that is quite a statement when you think Enter the Dragon only cost $850,000 to make, and I think now it's grossed over 400 million. Probably cost to profit ratio, it's one of the most successful movies of all time. And let's be honest, it is the movie that single-handedly started the whole kung fu craze in the 1970s and beyond. So let's start reading Paul's article and we'll break it down where we can. Enter the Dragon, the most overrated kung fu movie ever. Posted on July 5th, 2018 by Paul Bramhall. I get it. Enter the Dragon is an iconic movie. Ever seen a t-shirt of Bruce Lee? Chances are the image on it is one of him poised in a kung fu stance, 3 bloody scratches adorned his chest, face alive with intensity, and it's an image from the finale of said title. Do you think he means one of these? And even today, 45 years on, it's one that endures. It's also a landmark movie for its casting of an Asian lead in a co-produced Hollywood production made at a time when it was practically unheard of. However, is it a good movie? Yes, it's a great movie. Hell no. In fact, if someone was to tell me I had a choice of watching Enter the Dragon or Iron Monkey 2, guess what? I'd watch Iron Monkey 2. It's a hard fact to swallow that Lee postponed his filming of his sophomore directional feature Game of Death to make Enter the Dragon, a decision which, due to his untimely passing, would mean that the former would never be completed, at least not the way he intended. To put it into context, such a decision is the hypothetical equivalent of Jackie Chan placing Police Story on hold halfway through filming to head off to make The Spy Next Door instead. Frankly, it was a wrong call. You can't compare it to Jackie Chan's The Spy Next Door. Bruce hadn't figured out the plot of Game of Death yet, so when he took Enter the Dragon, he thought he'd have time to figure all this stuff out. But I don't think you can compare Enter the Dragon to The Spy Next Door. So naturally I find myself being the target of much derision whenever the discussion pops up about Enter the Dragon, and I pipe up with my opinion on how it's the most overrated kung fu movie ever made. You want me to watch a 1973 kung fu flick? Give me Blood Brothers. Give me When Taekwondo Strikes. For that matter, give me Night Iran. I've not seen any of the 3 films mentioned, I don't think. I'd watch these endlessly before having to inflict myself with the plodding pace, overlong runtime and one-sided fight scenes that so many seem to believe reflect Bruce Lee's crowning achievement. But let me put some structure to my ranting. If anyone was in any doubt as to why Enter the Dragon is to Bruce Lee what Millennium Dragon is to Yeung, then here's 10 points clarifying exactly that. It's directed by Robert Klaus. I must admit, Robert Klaus is not my favourite director. Think 78 Game of Death. And I honestly think Enter the Dragon's popularity, it's got nothing to do with Bob Klaus and everything to do with Bruce Lee. There was other elements as well, Lalo Schifrin's score, there was a whole bunch of elements, but let's be honest, it all sort of like knuckled down to one man, Bruce Lee. Warner Brothers provided an A-list star with a B-movie director, which is a crime in itself. Amidst the many visionary directors that came out of America in the 1970s, Robert Klaus could not be said to be one of them, with perhaps his biggest claim to fame before Enter the Dragon being that he directed an episode of Ironside. His affiliation with Bruce Lee would continue to dictate the rest of his career. He's the guy we can thank for the eventual release of Game of Death. Attempted to introduce Jackie Chan to American audiences with Battle Creek Brawl, and helmed cult B-movies like Force 5, and Jim Carter. And apart from Enter the Dragon, I can really only off the top of my head only think of another 3 Klaus movies. Enter the Dragon, of course, Game of Death, Black Belt Jones and Battle Creek Brawl with Jackie Chan. And it does get slated, but me personally, I went and see it in 1980 at the cinema and I loved it. They tried to bring in all the same elements again, you know, Lalo Schifrin, Klaus, but it didn't quite work for Jackie. Jackie is better off directing Jackie. It's as simple as that. As a side note, Klaus was also deaf, which likely explains a lot of the horrendous line delivery that so many cast members get away with in Enter the Dragon. Was Robert Klaus deaf? I didn't know that. I heard he was in the military, so surely that wouldn't work out. But if you guys know any more than me, please let me know in the comments. It stars John Saxon as a martial arts master. Saxon was already almost 40 by the time of Enter the Dragon, and was most likely cast thanks to having a black belt in karate and featuring in an episode of Kung Fu. While he's a solid journeyman actor and has built an impressive career in the world of B-movies, the decision to make him a co-star next to Bruce Lee is a lamentable one. John Saxon's acting, to me, was spot on. I honestly think the chemistry between him and Bruce, and whoever he interacted with, was top tier. Whenever Lee isn't on screen and we have to spend time with Saxon's character Roper, we're immediately transported into the world of uninspired and now terribly dated 70s Kish. When he's not frolicking with the ladies, we're subjected to his fight scenes. Yes, his fight scenes. Here we have a movie which could have given us a face-off between Bruce Lee and Bolo, but what do we get? Bolo versus John freaking Saxon. Words fail me. Obviously not. No Bolo versus Bruce Lee fight. Now I must admit, when I first watched Enter the Dragon, back when I was a young lad, I really wanted Bruce Lee to face off against Bolo, and I think a lot of people did. While it's true that it was Enter the Dragon that cemented Yang Xi's bulking frame into popular consciousness, he'd even take on his character's name for the rest of his career, there can be no denying that his talents are wasted. Essentially there to flex muscles and throw people around, before succumbing, of all things, to a bite on the leg and a kick in the balls. I didn't know a good kick to the Jacobs could kill people. I know it hurts. The fact that Enter the Dragon squanders an opportunity for the big man to face off against a little dragon is insufferable. Bolo has one of the coolest looking on-screen fighting styles to grace the silver screen. The so-called no-looking kung fu style, in which he fights while not actually looking at his opponent. Said style could have provided Enter the Dragon with some much needed variety in its action scenes, but alas, it wasn't to be. Bolo could move really well for a big guy, that's for sure. Sammo Hung could have choreographed the action. By 1973, Sammo already had over 10 choreography credits to his name, and was gradually starting to develop his own distinctive style. While he does get to appear in the opening scene of Enter the Dragon as Bruce Lee's sparring partner, providing the best fight of the whole movie. The best fight in the whole movie? I'm sorry, I think not. The rest of the action would have benefited greatly from Sammo's touch. Instead, what we're left with is Lee decimating whoever gets in his way with minimal effort, and lacks sure fights when he's not directly involved. Lee's strength lay in choreographing himself, with a style that rarely worked when choreographing others. See his work on The Wrecking Crew for further proof of this. Oh, I admit, the fight between Sharon Tate and Nancy Kwan in The Wrecking Crew isn't that great, if I'm honest. With Sammo at the helm, at least we would have gotten some worthy exchanges, not just a one-man army with no sense of danger or risk. For me, Sammo Hung is one of the best fight choreographers of all time. But we are talking about 1973. I mean, what he's done in the last 30, 40 years is out of this world. But by the time Enter the Dragon, I know he had 10 credits, but his choreography, from what I hear and have seen, it was still in its infancy. He hadn't developed into this amazing fight choreographer just yet. Bruce Lee is invincible. Yep, he's a badass. Not to be confused with the more entertaining Bruce Lee the Invincible featuring Chung Wai-man versus gorillas. Bruce Lee's seeming immunity to having anyone land a hit on him is one of the biggest detractors of Enter the Dragon. For the people that complain about Steven Seagal not being hit in his movies, man, they should check this one out. One of the most well-known lines has Lee declare, "Balls don't hit back." But apparently that also applies to most of his opponents. When he finally does have some damage inflicted in the finale, It's nothing more than aesthetically pleasing scratches, there to make him look cool rather than bruised and battered. In fact, the only person who even gets close to Lee is a leg-grabbing Bob Wall, which if you wanted to get technical doesn't count, because he's actually Yeung. Go figure. I kind of agree with this, but Bruce's style and the way he used to do his movies, he wanted to make himself look as good as possible. And I think he achieved it in this. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, he does take a lovely punch just prior to his battle with Han. Bruce was pretty invincible in Way of the Dragon and certainly Fist of Fury as well. But if you watched the footage of Bruce Lee in Game of Death that he filmed 1972 prior to doing Enter the Dragon, he took quite a lot of blows from Dan Inosanto, Ji-hun Jae and Kareem. So I do think he was going into the realms of more realistic fight choreography and not being superhuman. Bob Wall is the most unintimidating villain ever. I must admit, I quite agree with this. You know I'm not a huge fan of Bob Wall. When Bruce Lee decided to bring in karate champion Chuck Norris for the finale of Way of the Dragon, he probably thought he could recreate the intensity of their confrontation by bringing in another one, this time in the shape of Bob Wall. Wrong. Unlike the Little Dragon's evenly matched showdown in the Colosseum, there's never any doubt that he's going to beat the living daylights out of Wall. I did take a lot of pleasure in seeing him fight against Bruce Lee and not even getting a whack in. Them two back fists at the beginning was just joy, and I really did enjoy hating his character in Enter the Dragon. I think the only one he ever beat in the film was the old man at the beginning, in the flashback with Angela Mao. With the scarred villain resorting to a pair of smashed bottles, Lee channels the audience's rage at Angela Mao being given so little screen time by making quick work of his opponent, which in a more merciful world would have signalled the end credits. While Wall's time in Enter the Dragon was short, the career he built off it was quite the opposite, and still gives interviews to this day discussing the lame fight scene in question. It's not a lame fight scene. Yes, we all know Bob made a few quid selling the original gi he wore in Enter the Dragon quite a few times. Dodgy kid. Angela Mao is wasted. You may have noticed the recurring trend of martial artists that Enter the Dragon wasted the talents of, and so it continues with the inclusion of Angela Mao, hot off the heels of starring in the likes of Lady Whirlwind and Hapkido from the year prior. Mao had it all: the intense stare, a furious energy in her fight scenes, and an on-screen charm that was impossible to deny. To hear she was going to feature alongside Bruce Lee must have been pretty exciting news, but what do we get? A pitiful few minutes of screen time which consists of her being little more than a damsel in distress, one which doesn't get to show off any of the many talents that made her an icon that she was. She wasn't a co-star even. Basically her role was written in just as a flashback to set up Lee's revenge plot against O'Hara. She actually beats the hell out of a lot of O'Hara's gang. Instead, we had to wait for the following year to see her team up with a legitimate thespian in the form of the other fellow, George Lazenby. I thought she was awesome. Sick Keen acts like a useless old man. The legendary Hong Kong villain Sick Keen may have already been 60 by the time he appeared in Enter the Dragon, but it still doesn't justify the way he's reduced to a rather lame Asian hybrid of Dr. No and Blofeld from the 007 franchise. I kind of agree with this as well. Bruce at 32 fighting Sick Keen, or Shia Keen, or whatever how you pronounce it. He was knocking on 60 at the time, so it does seem a little bit uneven, the matchup. But having said that, the character of Han was a Shaolin master, plus he had knives and claws on the end of his hands. Keen still had the moves. Just check out the shapes he pulls in 1985's Hong Kong Godfather, made 12 years later. However, for whatever reason, his extensive kung fu repertoire was decided not to be utilised, so instead we have him running around in a hall of mirrors, a role which practically anyone could have played. And I still think the Hall of Mirrors scene is so cool and iconic. For anyone watching Enter the Dragon for the first time, King comes across as one of the least threatening villains in the history of cinema, which is a huge disservice to the man and his talents. If you want to see Kim face off against Bruce, watch the classic Bruce, the King of Kung Fu. It's a James Bond rip-off. We all know Michael Allen sort of ripped off the plot to Dr. No, the Bond film. The influence of Bond drifts in and out of Enter the Dragon like spliced footage in a Godfrey Ho movie, making it come across as shoehorned in rather than a natural part of the narrative. Look, if you want to see an Asian version of 007, check out Jimmy Wang Yu in Asia Pole from 1967 to see how it's done. Released the same year as Roger Moore's debut as Ian Fleming's most famous creation, the secret agent-styled shenanigans on display in Enter the Dragon were dated even before it hit the cinema screens. Casting Jeffrey Weeks as a poor man's M, I really like Mr. Braithwaite, and a head-scratching plot of a rogue Shaolin student using a martial arts tournament as a front to his opium smuggling operation. Robert Klaus and co should have taken the page out of the less is more manual of filmmaking. It's boring. What? Just short of 100 minutes, Enter the Dragon is at least 15 minutes too long. To think there are people out there still looking for additional footage is quite frankly unfathomable. We're not just looking for footage from Enter the Dragon, we're looking for any additional Bruce Lee footage. Look how mental we all went last year when we found the Mandarin cut of the Big Boss and the log scene that doesn't even feature Bruce in Game of Death. I remember freaking out when I see him at Sharon Tate's funeral. The plot should have been simple. Bruce Lee partakes in a martial art tournament to avenge the death of his sister. Chaos ensues. Instead, we're subjected to some nonsense about him being a hired secret agent from Shaolin, Saxon's completely uninspired backstory involving gambling debts, and Jim Kelly acting like he's in a completely different movie altogether. Considering Lee's co-stars have little to nothing to do in terms of contributing to the finale, the amount of time we have to spend with them leading up to it provides more padding than his punch bag. Look, they cast John Saxon and Jim Kelly to appeal to a wider audience, because at that time, back in 1972/3, maybe it was a huge gamble for Hollywood to just bet on one Asian who was pretty much unknown to the West. Boring is never a term I would ever associate to Enter the Dragon. That's just my humble opinion. What's yours? Do you know what? In fact, it's high time I dug out my 4K and gave it another rewatch. It's long overdue. Thanks for the article, mate. You've made me want to watch Enter the Dragon again. But that's just what I think. But guys, please let me know what you lot think. I will link the article in the description down below. It's a very well written piece, but is it accurate? No. Not in my opinion, no. But let me know your answers. I'd be interested to hear them. Right, before I go, guys, I want to thank everyone who's been commenting, liking, thumbs up, thumbs down, you know the deal. Before I go, good luck England tonight, 8 o'clock versus the Netherlands. I can't believe we're in the semis, but there you go. Right, before I go, as always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for my wonderful patrons. All the emails I'm getting, you guys are the best. But do let me know what you think of this article. I look forward to reading your comments. Right. Have yourselves an amazing week, guys. Much love, and I'll be back with another ramble real soon. You take care now.